like to start off by saying that it's not my fault if you don't like this speech. I have just had so much going on this week, it's absolutely ridiculous. And as if that weren't enough, my girlfriend of a year and a half just broke up with me last Friday. So basically what I'm saying is that this speech doesn't represent my full potential because I just couldn't focus on it enough. Now, if I had been able to try my best, I would deliver this speech and knock it out of the park. I'm a great public speaker, it's just that with all these obstacles in my way, I couldn't achieve my full potential. So just remember that this speech is not my fullest potential. Which, if you think about it, is pretty convenient for me, isn't it? Here you are, expecting to hear a thought-provoking talk from a bright young student, and suddenly you aren't in the same mindset anymore. You're thinking, oh, what a poor guy. Look at all he's been through. He can't be expected to perform. Let's clap for him loudest, since we feel so bad. Now, I understand this might be a bit of an exaggeration, but you get my point. However, there is one person in this room who's not allowed to think that way. Me. Because the minute I admit to myself that this isn't my best efforts, I no longer have as much of a desire to put forward a good product for you. I can get up here with a half-prepared speech, deliver a mediocre presentation, and still believe that I did, good enough, under the circumstances. I can even hold on to the delusion that at some point in the future, which may or may not happen, I can deliver this speech again and knock it out of the park. But I don't know that for sure. Now, if I actually believed the line of excuses I was feeding you at the beginning of this presentation, I would be doing what social psychologist Edward E. Jones calls self-handicapping. Essentially, this is when you put obstacles in your way so that you can't achieve your fullest potential. Now, this may seem ridiculous, but think about it for a second. Through self-handicapping, your ego is perfectly shielded because any of your successes become even more impressive due to the obstacles you had to overcome. And any of your failures can just be blamed on the obstacles. They don't need to negatively reflect on you. Now, in my case, my self-handicapping would have been not trying my hardest, but I'm sure all of us in this room have self-handicapped at some point. It's just a good strategy for protecting yourself from failure, because if you're not trying your best, nobody can tell you that you can't achieve something. Unfortunately, self-handicapping is not a good strategy to take if you actually want to succeed. If we do not doubt our limits, we will never know what we can truly accomplish. Unfortunately, our world is becoming more and more obsessed with avoiding failure. We now believe that if we fail even once, incredibly bad things will happen to us, and this has led to an increase in self-handicapping. So, to better understand this self-handicapping epidemic, let's first examine our failure paranoid culture. Then, recognize that self-handicapping is an understandable response to this culture before finally examining some solutions. Now, the world is an incredibly stressful and competitive place. Shocker, I know. But it's only getting more and more competitive as the years go by. And people growing up in this time period, i.e. myself and my peers, are under constant pressure to appear successful at all times. We need to show people that we can be successful, because if we don't, we've been told that we won't get as many opportunities. If you don't get the right grade on that test, you won't get into the college you won't get the job you want, and you won't have as many doors open to you in the future. Unfortunately, this is having a negative effect on the way we think. According to demographics expert Neil Howe, Generation Y, or people born between the years of 1980 and 2000, have significantly less of a belief than their parents that they can bounce back from failure. The ability to bounce back from failure is one of the most valuable skills we have because of the simple fact that we aren't going to succeed all the time. Nobody can succeed at everything that they try, but our modern Western culture isn't telling us that. The culture is telling us that we do need to succeed at everything, or else we won't have the opportunities that everybody else has. So, although we know that we can't always be successful, that isn't what we were taught as children. Many people in my generation were taught that you do always get a trophy. I'm sure we're all familiar with the policy in children's sports that everybody does get a trophy, even if you don't win. While I'm sure that this did avoid many crying fits on the soccer field, it didn't teach us the important lesson that sometimes we aren't going to be the best. Sometimes there's going to be somebody who's better than us, and they deserve that trophy more than we do. Now, people find themselves in a harmful paradox. The only way that they can believe that they are successful is by succeeding at everything. But they're also beginning to realize that they can't do that. The solution? Self-handicapping. But I'm sure many of you are asking a legitimate question right now. If our culture is so obsessed with success, why would we put obstacles in our way to inhibit our success? It seems counterintuitive. And it would be, if our culture was actually focused on the success. But what we are more focused on than success is avoiding failure. While this may seem like splitting hairs to most of you, it's actually an important distinction. Self-handicapping allows people to believe that they aren't failing because they have handicaps in their way, so they can convince themselves that their actual potential is much greater than what they are actually demonstrating. It allows people to see themselves as slacker geniuses rather than as people of average ability and intelligence. And that is incredibly, incredibly tempting, because everybody wants to be seen as capable, and if possible, more capable than they actually are. A good example of this is the American skier Bode Miller. Mr. Miller actually had an incredibly successful Olympic career, winning multiple bronze, silver, and even a couple gold medals. But what he's most well known for is not his performance on the ski slopes, but his attitude off. Mr. Miller openly admitted that his drinking and partying negatively impacted his ability to ski and had an impact on how many medals he won at the Olympic Games. This forces us to ask the question, how well could he have done if he tried his best? If he hadn't handicapped himself like that and had tried to achieve his full potential, how many more medals could he have won? I'm sure most of us say that he could have won more, but nobody knows that. And while this puts Mr. Miller in a great position mentally, since he can tell himself that even when he wasn't trying his best, he still achieved great things. Would you rather have an Olympic silver medal and the belief that if you tried your hardest, you would have gotten gold, or an Olympic gold medal? The problem is, self-handicapping is just so alluring. It allows people to not have to try their best and still have themselves and others believe that they have great potential. A study done by social psychologist Bernard Weiner proved this point. He took two groups of people, those described as high fear of failure and those described as low fear of failure. The groups were then given a pill which would inhibit their ability to perform a basic task, or a placebo, which they were told would have the same effect. The interesting result of this study was that when the high fear of failure group took the placebo pill, they actually performed better on the physical task that they were asked to do than when they had taken no pill at all. The reason for this is that the onus for failure was no longer on them. It was on the pill. Because of this, their stress at performing the task was reduced, and that allowed them to perform the task better. Unfortunately, in life, we can't give ourselves the placebo. When we self-handicap, we actually put obstacles in our way which inhibit our abilities to succeed, and this decreases our potential. Now, the excuse that many self-handicappers use is that when it actually matters, then they'll step it up and actually try their best, remove those handicaps, and reveal their full potential. But that's just not true. I've heard that excuse since middle school. I heard it all the way through high school. I hear it in college, and I can guarantee you I'm going to hear it when I get to my job. The fact is that motivation isn't just something that you can find. Motivation is difficult to find, and if it were easy to remove handicaps, people would just do it all the time instead of self-handicapping. But handicaps are difficult to remove. So, what people need to start doing is removing the handicaps on a regular basis. Instead of convincing yourself that your potential is much greater than it actually is, we need to actually figure out our potential by removing the handicaps and figuring out what we really can do. Now, this will be terrifying because you won't be good at everything. I can pretty much guarantee that. And openly admitting to yourself, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that you are completely physically and mentally incapable of doing something is one of the most terrifying experiences there is. But I'm not an astronaut. I am not a football player, and much to my dismay, I am not a freestyle rap genius. But I can run a mile in under 8 minutes. I am an A student, and I am a more than adequate public speaker. We need to shift our culture's belief that we need to succeed at everything in order to be successful to an understanding that there are going to be some things that we'll fail at, but that's okay, and that there's nothing wrong with that. So how do we stop self-handicapping? What we need to do is change our culture's definition of success. Instead of believing that we need to succeed at everything, we need to think back to those beautiful 5 words that our parents told us when we were children. Did you try your best? Because as much as our world tells us that that doesn't matter, that is the only thing that matters. Because if you have really tried your best and given something your all, nobody can ask for anything more than you, because you are achieving at your fullest potential. Now, you won't be good at everything. That's a guarantee. And while that's very disappointing, especially for the kid who always dreamed of being a freestyle rap genius, it's ultimately good for the individual and for society. Because instead of fooling yourself into thinking that you're good at something, people can actually pursue the things that they really are good at. So you know what? This is the best speech I can deliver. I am holding nothing back, and this is my full potential. It is terrifying to be judged on my full potential without any handicaps or obstacles to hide behind. But it also feels wonderful. I understand that I am not the best public speaker there is, but that is no excuse for me to try to accomplish anything less than my absolute best.